And you're saying I can't go home.
That's supposed to be good wording.
That was television.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so let's pick up where we left off yesterday. There's a brisa, and what we're going to see is that this brisa is disagreed upon later on. But this brisa makes a distinction between Kriya Shema and the Amida, what we call Shmona Esrei. Okay, and the brisa had said mafsikin l'Kriya Shema ve'in mafsikin l'Tefillah, that if you're in the middle of a job, if you're in the middle of work, then you have to stop whatever you're doing in order to recite Kriya Shema once the Zman Kriya Shema has arrived. But you don't interrupt your work for the Amidah. And that's assuming that you can finish your work before the Zman of davening elapses. We haven't talked about what the Zman Tefillah is, but we'll get to that later. So the question now is, why is there this distinction between Kriya Shema and the Amida? So Amar Rabbi Acha, Kriya Shema Dvar Torah, Tefillah Eina Dvar Torah. So we saw reason number one yesterday, which is a very curious argument that Tefillah is not biblical, which we said the Rambam does not agree with this statement. The Rambam holds that Tefillah is midioraisa. But it could be what the Gemara is saying is that tefillah, well, we'll see that'll be the second reason. Amar Rebbe Ba, Kriya Shema Zmana Kavua, Tefillah Ein Zmana Kavua. The reason number two is even if you say that tefillah is midioraisa, and that'll be what the Rambam hangs his hat on, is this second opinion. Kriya Shema has a fixed time, where Amida does not have a fixed time. Technically, a person can daven the entire day and fulfill his obligation of the Amidah. Now, that's the way the Rambam understands it. He says that the Rambam says that there is a biblical commandment to call out to God every day, but it is not at a fixed time. It could be any time from morning until night. We, however, rabbinically have a limit that is placed on the Zman Tefillah just as much as on the Zman Kriya Shema, which we'll learn about later on. But that would be the second reason why you don't have to interrupt your work to do the Amidah, because you always have time later on because there's no fixed time. And then we have a third reason, Amar Rebbe Yossi, Kriya Shema, this is very curious, Kriya Shema eina tzricha kavana, tefillah tzricha kavana. That Kriya Shema does not require one's mental focus, but tefillah does require mental focus. Now here too, we could reference the Rambam in Hilchas Tefillah. The Rambam says that if a person says the words of tefillah without concentration, he's accomplished nothing. This is actually codified in the Shulchan Aruch, where the Shulchan Aruch writes that if a person says the Amidah without having kavana, it's as if he says specifically for the first bracha of the Amidah, it's as if he didn't daven at all. And the Machaber says you have to go back and start all over again. Is that how we paskin?
Well, we say that you're not going to have kavana the second time either these days.
Right. So right, exactly. So we paskin, the Ramah interjects, and he says that we're so feeble-minded today that there's just as much of a chance that you won't have kavana the second time around as the first time. And therefore, since there's brachas that are involved, and you may say wasteful brachas, he says you're better off not going back. But what you do see from here is that tefillah without kavana is insubstantial. It's really like it doesn't mean very much. Whereas Kriya Shema is an obligation that doesn't require kavana. So what do we mean when we say that it doesn't require kavana? He says, if you look at what the Art Scroll says, Shimkara Shema velo kivein beferish amilim yatsi chavasa. I'm just reading from the Art Scroll. He says that if you recite the Shema without thinking about what you're saying, you fulfill your obligation. And lachein kavu chachamim shemiyad keshemagia zman kriya shema tzarich lekora afilu ba'odo oseg b'malachta. And therefore the rabbi said, even if you're in the middle of your work, so your focus really is not on prayer. Your focus is really thinking about the job that you have to do. They said, recite Kriya Shema nonetheless, because even if you don't have kavana, at least you'll still be yotzei.
Rabbi, I presume we still seek kavana, which is why we cover our eyes.
Right, you're supposed to still have kavana. It's not like you don't have to have. It's like, do whatever you want,
As long as you say the word.
watch the news while you're citing Kriya Shema. No, we're not saying that. It's that since if you didn't have kavana, b'di'evid, you're still yotzei, the rabbis felt that it's acceptable to demand that you drop everything you're doing, even though mentally you may not be so engaged.
Kavana of having a mitzvah and the kavana of thinking about the words.
There could potentially be such a differentiation. Right now, we want to try and we also want to find out how much of the Shema requires kavana. The first pasuk, the first paragraph, all three paragraphs. Those are all good questions. So, but hopefully we'll get greater clarification. Amar Rebbe Mani Kashiate Kume, he says on this last answer that Kriya Shema doesn't require kavana. Rebbe Mani says, I asked the following question of Rebbe Yossi, Va'afilu Tamar, Kriya Shema ina tzricha kavana, shlosha psukim harishonim of Kriya Shema tzrichen kavana. He says, even if you're going to say that Kriya Shema does not require kavana, but what about the first three psukim of Kriya Shema? That should certainly require kavana. So what does the footnote say? Bishloshet hapsukim harishonim shel Kriya Shema yesh hachraza al yichud Hashem kabbalas malchus shamayim v'kabbalas ol mitzvos. He says umishum kach hakavana bapsukim elu me'akeves. He says the first three psukim of Kriya Shema include accepting the yoke of heaven upon yourself and declaring that God is one and accepting the yoke of the commandments. Psukim elu mistayamim v'hayu hadivarim ha'ele al levavecha lelamed shehem tzrichim kavanas halev. That the words al levavecha, like, so you're saying Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. That's declaring God to be one. Ve'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your might, and with all your soul. And number three, V'hayu hadivarim ha'ele. These things that I am commanding you, the mitzvos have to be on your heart at all times. So those three psukim, argues the Bavli, argues the Yerushalmi, should require kavana. Don't they? Isn't it obligatory to have kavana for at least those? He doesn't even count that. He said, and if you look at the brackets, Lamaisa yeshnam deo shanos be'eza chelek mikriya shema hakavana ma'akeves. He says, halacha lamaisa, there are different opinions as to what parts of the Kriya Shema absolutely require kavana to the point that you're not yotzei if you didn't have kavana. And he says, I refer you to the Gemara that we'll see later on Daf Yud Ches, and the Bavli on Daf Yud Gimel. Rebbe Mani Sover Kedas Bar Kapara Muvas Begemar Lekaman Shahakavana Me'akeves Bekriyas Shloshes Apsukim Harishonim. He says, we will see that it is a machlokes. Not everyone agrees that you need the first three psukim to have kavana. Some say that the first pasuk alone, and some say the first two psukim. So he says, but in any event, let us go back. He says, how can you tell me that Shema doesn't require kavana? There's a minimal amount of kavana that's required for Shema as well. So min go the inun tzivchar michavein. So Rebbe Yossi answered the question and he said, for that small amount, a person can have kavana even when he's interrupted his work. So we're not worried that you're not going to have kavana for that small amount. We are worried that you're not going to have kavana for an entire Shemona Esrei. And for that, we say you're better off not interrupting your work, finishing your task at hand, and then clearing out your head and then you'll be able to daven a proper Shemona Esrei. Okay, so that's the distinction according to this price. So there we saw three differences. Either it's because the Amida is not a biblical commandment, or it's a biblical commandment, but it doesn't have a fixed time, or the Amida doesn't. The Amida requires kavana, and the Shema does not require kavana.
Letting you do your work first protects the kavana you need for the Shemona Esrei.
You're going to need kavana, so we don't want you to interrupt in the middle because you're
Right.
going to be thinking about your job. Okay, so
Point there, but we were saying with the Amida, and there are those who I think that there's great merit to do the early mincha because you're showing that you're trying to do minchas, with shizah or as early as you can. But on the other hand, you're interrupting your day. So many times, like say, people are working, in an office situation, and they go in for those 2 o'clock minchas, those quick sort of minchas, but they're right in the middle of their day, and they're like their head's still in their work, and they're running off to the mincha, but they're not really. So wouldn't it be better to not do that early mincha and do it later in the day when you finish your work?
I think it'll depend on what kind of work you're involved with. In the times, it's a good question. In the times of the Gemara, people were doing manual labor out in the field. So if you wanted to take a break to daven the Amida, you'd have to climb down the tree, take off your dungarees. It was a whole thing. And we're concerned that you're in the middle of the task. You've got half of your orchard done, half the orchard is not done. When it comes to a work day, we take breaks all the time.
Mhm.
We take coffee breaks, we take lunch breaks. People typically take a break for mincha when they take their lunch break. That's typically what people do. There also, you have to take into consideration, there are guys whose attitude is, I better daven mincha now because I don't want this over my head the whole day. That I got to make sure that I make mincha. Let's say mincha's at 5.
Yes.
And
In the wintertime, it's
in the winter, and and I'm scared I'm going to forget because I'm going to want to go out with my wife or whatever it is, and then I'm not going to have time. So it's a question of every person needs to evaluate at what time of the day will my mincha be more meaningful and not something that I view as a burden.
In counterbalancing Ron's argument, you're also putting Hashem in the middle of your workday, and recharging and thinking about God interspersed with that, as opposed to not
I mean,
davening for
Yeah, I mean,
12 hours.
I'd like to think that that's the case.
It's ideal.
Yeah,
So it depends on the mindset of the
yeah, I'd like to think, yeah. It really, yeah. So I think it depends on the individual. But as far as, this halacha that you have to have kavana for Shemona Esrei, I mean, if we were to look in the let's see. Let's say, hold on a second. All right, so you're not, once the Zman Tefillah has arrived, okay, of course, you're not allowed to do anything, so that's the first siman. The second siman talks about where you're supposed to stand, where you're not supposed to, places where you're not supposed to daven. Try to daven in a shul, try to daven with a minyan, etc., etc., etc. You should not stand at the doorway of the Beis HaKnesses.
Look like it's a burden.
Yeah. Okay.
You should put a sign up there for that.
Yeah. I don't understand why
here all the time.
I don't understand why people daven outside of the shul, like outside of the base midrash, like it's dafka stand, not even at the door, but outside.
Where you
Sorry?
looking? Run away.
I'm looking at the
maybe
Shulchan
that's what-
Aruch.
Yeah,
Pull it
but I
up,
mean,
or-
it's worse than.
Where do you mean?
Screen.
Oh, I'm just trying to find it first.
Kiss.
We don't stand in the doorway.
We're near the ringer.
We have serious kavanah.
On the bracha for sure.
So many brachos are made.
You're not allowed to spit. Okay, here we are. It's in Siman Tzadi Ches. And it's in the first sif. If you want, I can pop it up on the screen, but or maybe I'll just read it to you quickly. Hamispalel tzarich sheyachavein belibo perush hamilos shemotzi bisvasav. That when you're davening the Amida, you have to think at least about the translation of the words, what the words mean that you're producing from your mouth. V'yachshov ki'ilu shchina kenegda. You should be thinking that the divine presence is right in front of you. V'yasir kol hamachshavos hatordos oso. You have to remove all distractions, all the other things that are cluttering your mind. Ad shetishaer machshavto v'kavanaso zaka v'tfilaso. So that your thoughts are clear and focused on your prayers.
Easy.
Now, so now you can imagine I'm in the middle of picking bananas on the plantation. And then all of a sudden someone says, I just saw the sunrise, time to daven. And then I'm strapped to a tree, 20 feet up and picking my bananas. And I'm just supposed
You
to.
got to split.
I got to drop everything. And yeah. So anyway.
Don't explain it.
So the Shulchan Aruch writes, "V'yachshav ki'ilu hayemedaber lifnei melech basar v'adam." Your thought should be that if I was speaking to a mortal king, hayemesader devarav u'machavin b'hem yafilu bal yikashel. I would be working my best to make sure that the words that I'm saying come out properly. Kal v'chomer, so certainly that's true. Lifnei melech malchei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu. If you're standing in front of the King of Kings, Shehu Choker Kol HaMachshavos, who can peer into everyone's thoughts, certainly you got to be focused. That this is what pious people used to do in the old days. Shahayu misbodedin umechavnim b'tfilasan. They would sit in meditation and focus their thoughts. Until they were able to divest their physicality from themselves and to completely dominate their mental faculty. They would, to the point where they were reached near prophecy. And therefore, if while you're in the midst of the Amida, a foreign thought comes into your head, okay, yishtok ad shetispatil hamachshava. Stop saying the words. Don't keep going on autopilot. Stop the words. Wait until the foreign thought departs, and then the foreign thought about that episode on Gilligan's Island with Marianne and Ginger.
No, that's up a long
And
time.
then-
But Rabbi, I really appreciate you planting this. So
And,
I know what's going to
Now
happen.
to answer my son asked for.
until
It'll be a 3-hour tour.
until the thought goes away. B'tzarech sheyachshav b'dvarim hamachniim halev u'mechavnim oso la'aviv shabashmam. You have to think about things that will humble the heart and will focus your attention to your Father in heaven. Lo yachshav b'dvarim sheyesh behem talus rosh. And don't think about things that are frivolous. And let me just see.
Was it true that the tefillah were shorter at the time? They continue to add with prayers.
Well, we're talking about specifically the Shemona Esrei. We're talking specifically about the Shemona Esrei, and that actually, I'm just trying to think where is.
The other problem with the analogy with the king is.
Here we are.
If we were to speak to a king 3 times a day,
Yeah.
would be less of a. If you're in
Right.
constant
Okay, but let's imagine for a second you're working for Donald Trump, okay, and you're in the Oval Office 3 times a day. You're still going to wear a suit. and you're still gonna know, you're still gonna be focused whenever you come into the Oval Office. So that's really what you have to be thinking about. Is even though even though I'm one of the president's aides, I can't just start slouching off, right? I gotta be in that moment because the king, the president may fire me from his cabinet if I'm not really, if I don't have my head in the game. So that's really,
So what happened to Zelensky when he showed up in his non-suited?
yeah. So later on in Siman Kuf Aleph, the Mechaber says, "Hamispalel tzarich sheyachavin b'chol habrachos." You have to have kavana for every single bracha of the Shemona Esrei. V'im eno yachol lechavin b'kulam, if you cannot have kavana for all of them, because you have ADD, like we all do, or ADHD, whatever it's called today, we all have attention deficit disorder, and our minds wander. And by the way, someone told me that meditation is really good for this, and I think it's correct, although I haven't really devoted enough time in my day to meditation. But if you practice meditation, there are meditation apps. Just start 5 minutes a day on meditation. You can download this. It's actually, let me just see if it's.
Isn't
like tefillah itself kind of like a meditation?
There's something called Insight Timer. It's a free app, and it just you press the button, you start. You have to be sitting in a comfortable position. Close your eyes and focus on one thing. Focus on one word, focus on one thing. I focus just on seeing Hashem's name in my mind and do it for 5 minutes. And it actually is very helpful in conditioning your mind to stay focused.
Wow.
So there are many apps like this. The one I use is Insight Timer. It just basically, it just rings a bell. And then at the end of the 5 minutes, it rings another bell and it's very serene.
That second bell would wake me up.
Yeah, it's
What?
Said that second bell would wake like.
Yeah, no, look, is it possible that you fall asleep? Yeah, but it's fascinating if you try this exercise and you say to yourself, I'm not going to allow my thoughts to deviate from just this moment that I'm thinking about, this word I'm thinking about, or that image that I'm thinking about in my mind. You see, it's very, very difficult because our minds naturally wander because we're so cluttered with different things. So this is a good exercise to try and condition your mind, is to try meditation. In any event, that's really what he's describing. The Hasidim Rishonim, they would sit in meditation to condition their minds to remain focused. And it's not an easy thing to do. We think, oh, it's new age baloney, but it's not. It's not new age baloney. It's real. And that's what the Shulchan Aruch is even saying. These ancient men who were very pious meditated before they would daven. It'd be interesting. Okay. So anyway, what does the Shulchan Aruch write? He says, "Lefachos yechaven ba'avos." At the very minimum, if you have attention deficit, you have to focus on the first bracha of the Amida, which is called the bracha of Avos. Im lo kivein ba'avos, if you would not have kavana for that first bracha, afal pi shekivein b'chol hashor, even if you said the rest of the Shemona Esrei with kavana, yachzor v'yispalel, got to go back and do the whole Shemona Esrei. Now, we don't paskin that way. The Ramah says, the ha'idna ein chozrin bishvil chesron kavana. Today, when lacking kavana is not a sufficient reason to go back and daven, sha'af b'chazara karavu shelo yechaven, because the chances are you won't have kavana the second time around. Im kain lama yachzor. If so, what's the point?
Mhm.
So therefore, but it's a sorry state of affairs. In other words, the Ramah is not suggesting that he disagrees in principle with the Mechaber. He's not saying, I think the Mechaber is wrong that you don't have to go back because you didn't have kavana. He's saying we're such meatheads that if we try to do it the second time, we're going to end up having the same lack of kavana that we did the first time.
And how much worse we are now than we were in those times.
Yeah, when this is being written, yeah. So, but that doesn't absolve a person from doing his best to try to have kavanah. Bottom line is that you have to have prolonged, protracted kavanah during the Amida. So when it comes to Kriya Shema, you're capable of having kavanah even in the middle of your work for a short period of time, maybe for 3 psukim, maybe we'll see it's only 1 pasuk, we'll see the difference of opinion. But with the Amida, where you need to have protracted kavanah, it's not going to work if you're in the middle of a job. Now, Amar Rabbi Yochanan b'shem Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai says day is today. Higon anu sha'oskim b'talmud Torah afilu l'kriya shema ein anu mafsikin. So what we're going to see now is that Rabbi Yochanan says in the name of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai that he disagrees if you're a Torah scholar that we engage in Talmud Torah, and that's the only thing that we do exclusively all day. He says, then if that's the case, then if you started your Torah studies before morning and you continued into the morning, you would not have to interrupt your learning even to recite Kriya Shema, which is a shocking statement. And we're going to need some clarification. But it sounds like what Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai is suggesting is that you're putter from reciting Kriya Shema because you're so immersed in your Torah study. Now,
that's a question on the Haggadah. When they stayed up all night.
Very good.
Years on Kriya Shema. Why do you have to interrupt that?
Okay.
Very good.
But remember, it's only for people whose Torah study is the only thing they're engaged in the entire day. One of the interesting sociological things that we're going to learn is that there were 2 different kinds of rabbinic leaders in the times of the Gemara. There were those who could spend their entire day just learning Torah, and there were those who had day jobs and learned Torah in addition to that, and they were able to manage to be great scholars despite the fact that they were working and they had other jobs that they needed to do. Okay, so it's a good question, but first of all, we don't know if
How could they
everyone.
reach that level if you're not learning all day?
Good question. Good question. It is possible.
But somebody who spent, training for a year versus someone who's training for 6 months.
Yeah, listen, look at the Rambam. The Rambam was a physician. He spent his whole day.
Rabbi Kuski, isn't he a doctor?
There's one of the Rabbi Abraham Twersky had a full career.
You're talking about the elite of certain.
You're talking about the elite of the elite, yeah. Right. There are people that are capable of doing it. In the times of the Gemara, perhaps it was more possible. It's unclear, but you really have to be someone special in order to be able to reach the level of scholarship of some of these Tanoim and Amoraim who used to work for a living. Rashi also. Yeah, he was a winemaker. So can you imagine?
I guess
There you go. You see how productive Rashi was? It's unbelievable when you think about it. And in one lifetime to be able to produce commentary on all of Tanakh, on all of Talmud Bavli, it's just mind-boggling how one person could be that productive and still have a day job.
maybe the wine helped.
Netflix, that's what.
Yeah.
Wine helped.
I'm not so sure. Okay, so we're going to see a dissenting opinion, Mirz Hashem, tomorrow, that Rabbi Yochanan himself is going to reflect on the fact that he was not learning all day, and therefore he could not exempt himself from Kriya Shema just because he was in the midst of learning. So Mirz Hashem will see that.
Is this the same Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish?
Same one.
Is that why we have
We'll hold it here for today.
physical motions in the first bracha of the Shemona Esrei, the bowing, the steps forward? Is that all Kavanah?
I don't think so. I don't think that those are connected, you know? Because we bow it up